Bob, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
I'm the Bible geek. I do my question and answer podcast with questions people have emailed me. I often appear on History Valley and sometimes on Free Thought Prophet and other similar disreputable. And I guess I'd have to count myself basically a writer. I write fiction and nonfiction. I'm churning out books. I have one or two that just came out. One called The Gospels Behind Gospels, and another massive one that is at a publisher now called Houses of the Holy, a higher critical survey of world religions. But I also edit fiction anthologies for a couple of different publishers, and most of those are in the vein either of H.P. Lovecraft, cosmic horror, etc., or Robert E. Howard of the sword and sorcery genre. And let's see, I guess I can stop my academic by saying I do not really consider a member any longer of any religion, but I love religion and religious people, unlike many atheists or non-theists who seem to have kind of an evangelistic fixation to get people out of religion. I don't think that that's other people's beliefs are none of my business, but I do seek to bring people perspectives that will be new to them so they can take it wherever they want. So that's kind of my approach.
Cool. So the topic today was deplatforming and cancel culture. You had an interview with Pine Creek, Doug Pine Creek, on his channel, and got a lot of blowback. Both you and Doug got a lot of blowback from that. I find deplatforming a really interesting topic because it seems like the whole point of deplatforming is to prevent information from getting to people who would accept or believe that information. This is very strange because if you consider like an adult being able to form their own ideas and beliefs, and you want to prevent that person from being able to receive information that they may accept to change their beliefs. It seems very, very fascistic to me. I don't really quite understand the justification behind that. It seems very strange. What are your thoughts?
Oh, yeah, I think that's exactly correct. Because it's like the Grand Inquisitor in Dostoevsky, that you think, I mean, you know that you know better, and you can't trust anybody else to have any sense of discernment. So you're going to have to decide for them what's true, and this whether they want you to or not. And it does seem to me that's the fascistic propaganda and totalitarian thought control. I don't mean to make them more dramatic or cinematic than it should, because there's not, I mean, I'm not some authoritative voice. I've been asked what my views are, and I think sometimes just for entertainment's sake, so that people say, this guy's views are not in the mainstream of our listeners, so this ought to really stir up if we trick him into blabbing these crazy things he believes. Well, I don't know that, so I just go into it thinking, if my opinion is requested, I will explain it and defend it, but I don't try to propagandize, and I find it a waste of time if others are. Just put the information out there, let them think for themselves. I do not try to convert people to any view I have. I'm just more democratic. I'm to pose questions and information and let them yourself. I mean, I've changed my mind, probably will again. People are always in the process of doing that. So if I can help them do it, that's all I'm trying to do.
So a lot of people in the chat are saying it's really choppy. I wanted to try a different link. I put a different link in the private chat. Can you see that?
Yes.
Try joining that one because I think that might work better. Because yeah, they're
Okay.
saying they can't do it at all on their end.
Let's see. Okay. Yeah, of course, it might not be the tech problem. It could just be that I am speaking in incoherent verbal salad, and that may not change, even if it's a better medium.
Well, I think it's I pulled up YouTube on my end and it's very scratchy on the YouTube end. It's making like buffering noises. So I don't think your voice can make those kinds of pitches. It would be very impressive if it could. But do you see, like, could you go to the website whereby.com/tjump? Do you see that link in the description?
I think I'm on it.
I'll have Jeff email you a new link.
Okay. Let me take a look.
All right, he's working on it, and because yeah, it's the audio quality is not good on their end. They're saying that.
Oh boy. Let's see. So I can find this link in my email as I did the original.
Yep. He's Jeff is sending it now. Should be
Okay.
there within the next minute or so.
Mm-hmm.
This is the same link. So the new one should be whereby.com/tjump.
Okay, here we go. Okay. Is this any better?
I'll check.
Mm-hmm.
It might be a little better. We can try that for a bit. So like, you can talk for a little bit, and I'll test the sound on the other end.
Hmm. Yeah, this the thing with Pine Creek Doug, it unleashed a bunch of fireworks at the time, though perhaps not as well. Yeah, I guess it was probably about the same as when my intro to an anthology of heroic fantasy stories was posted on Amazon for all to see, and I was arguing that such material was good for adolescents to read, as I the same age I was when I began to read the stuff, and that it inculcates male virtue, and that this is especially needed in our day with all of the toxic masculinity talk and so forth. And boy, have the authors in the book pulled out, and the publisher was scared of being boycotted and dropped the project, and so I wound up publishing it with somebody else with different and better material and so on. But boy, was that a oh! And then the guy that had been interviewing me on his podcast for a few years, he was threatened with cancellation if he
Mythision, Derek.
yes, if he continued to have me on there, because even though we didn't talk politics, that was never our subject matter. The mere fact that I was tainted by conservative views, you can't have that, and so he was threatened to get it if he kept me on. So I said, "Look, don't worry, I'll." Step off. That's all right. I don't want you to be in this position. But that wasn't really the end of it. And now I believe he is being threatened with the same kind of nonsense because of his association with another controversial scholar. Oh, brother. And I mean, my friendship with Derek is restored, and there's no problem there. But what a mess. It's amazing how hypersensitive and ideologically purist some of these people are, when this is not even my subject, really. I'm I talk about H.P. Lovecraft and about the Bible and so forth. I don't mind acknowledging what my views are, but I don't have a politics podcast or anything like that. It seems to me irrelevant to what I'm doing in media, but apparently some people feel like, oh no, you got to pass the litmus test in every respect.
Yeah, I think it's some kind of a war going on between these political views, that if you share a different political view, they don't want you to be put on the news or give any kind of platform because you might actually convert people to your side. People might accept what you're saying, and that's the worst thing ever. And so I find it's really strange, this idea of trying to put a wall in front of information to prevent other human adults from being able to access certain information because they might agree with that information.
Well
And
put, yes.
so I think it's quite ironic, from especially people on the left who are always been pro freedom of speech, pro open ideas, open borders, for them to then say for certain ideas, no, we can't allow these. No, you're not even allowed to speak about them. It's just bad. Nope. It's a very strange hypocrisy in their worldview.
Yes, it is. And the weirdest irony I see in this is that given people showing what they're really made of, what the implications of their ideology really are, tending in this fascistic direction, it has forced people who are liberals but not ultra leftists to make common cause with conservatives. And because of the lay of the land, conservatives now can close ranks with more old time liberals, because they used to dismiss them as paranoids, and now they realize no, they were right. So you have Glenn Greenwald as a frequent contributor to the Tucker Carlson show. You have a bunch of openly gay commentators on Fox News. You never would have seen that in earlier times, but there's been this realignment, which in some ways is very good, but in others, it just sort of reveals where people are at, and it's disturbing.
Yeah, for sure. I think that the trend of these kinds of ideologies, it's kind of like book burning. It's very much like book burning in the fact that you're trying to prevent this particular information you don't like from being shared across the masses. And that trait of book burning we see as very like Inquisition, Nazi, very, very fascistic in its ideology. And yet the people doing it in this case are the ones who are anti-fascist, the Antifa movement, the very far left. And I think, and they don't realize it. I think they don't understand how what they're doing is in many cases very fascistic, and they don't see the hypocrisy of their own worldview and think like end justifies the means kind of a thing, which is the exact same justification that those horrible ideologies use. And I don't know how to communicate this to them. It's a very strange position to be in, to see them doing this and not recognize that what they're doing is the signifier of the thing that they are opposed to, the thing that they want to fight the most.
Yeah, you think you're anti-fascist and you're doing a great imitation of the brown shirts of Hitler? What has happened?
So how did you said that you got your authors of one of your books got pulled out and you got dumped by one of your publishers? How did they actually watch the video, or was it simply from people mailing in? Was it like people emailing them and saying you must drop this person because they're terrible, something?
Yes, I'm not sure if the publisher himself, with whom I had gotten along well before this thing exploded, I'm not sure if well, I think he must have read the introductory essay, which is not the stories themselves that caused the problem, but I assume he had read the whole thing. But I know, as he himself said, he didn't dare continue to publish the book because he had gotten so many emails from people saying, if you publish this guy, I'm never buying anything you publish again. And he said, well, sorry, that's that. And I was just, now I realize I shouldn't have been surprised, but I sure was at the time. So I think he had read it. And I know the people that objected to him, who sort of ratted me out, they had not seen the book, but Amazon will give you a sample of it and what they to try to entice you. And they published most of my editorial introduction, which was this essay about how this is timely stuff. And they just thought, what? I wasn't enthusiastic about transgenderism, and that I thought that a lot of rape accusations were actually detrimental to women's safety because they were just crying wolf. Though I detest actual rapists and would like to see them executed and so forth, but they just, oh, this guy's a sexist and a bigot and a rape apologist. I thought, what? How are you getting this from what I said? And so they had read that, and it was enough for them, including half my authors, to say, oh, no, I don't want to be associated with this. And that struck me as incredibly ironic, since this was a heroic fantasy anthology, which is all about macho ancient heroes and all that. You are against this. This is what you're writing about, and I just was utterly flabbergasted at that, and that was the end of any professional relationship I had with those authors.
Yeah, I think it's that for the more extreme positions where the genuine racist, the genuine transphobic, genuine people who have hateful positions, they aren't they don't express those in just obvious terms. They've learned how to hide them behind dog whistle statements or statements that can go either way so that they can't be blamed as well. And now those statements have been essentially placed as is equally as extreme as simply saying like anything about a race in general. And I think that many of the statements that me and you may use in common day parlance happen to be those statements, and then when interpreted in the lens of the left perspective, it seems like you're equally as racist as the racist because it's the same language they use, but they use that specifically because it hides the racism, because there's a interpretation of it not being the bad thing. Like I had that recently, a guy on my chat, he was talking about making fun of the hat of a Jewish guy, which on its own is just a joke. It's just his hat. But if you continually doing it over and over and over again, it became a little more than that. It was like, now it seems like he's specifically attacking the identity of the person or whatever. And so there's this gray area between these statements that are rather mundane on their own, but can be interpreted into a more extreme, or a dog whistle for a more extreme position. And it's hard to know where to draw the line on those things, or how to interpret which way the person may lean simply based off of those statements.
Yeah, it's all tending toward Orwellian newspeak to make sure that that never happens, and the ears of the sensitive are not violated with an opinion they don't hold. They define, they set up a code of approved vocabulary. So that I now hear that in the military, they're abolishing saying, yes, sir. Oh, sir. Oh, no, can't have that. Just, hey, you, I guess. What? And so you can't use the traditional view, or gender roles or gender pronouns. You can't say parents. What are they going to say? Parental units, like on the Coneheads. They say this is what you have to say. Well, what do you mean? You can't make me speak this language, can you? Oh, yeah, we can say, if you don't say it the way we would, that's hate speech. As we define it. So we're controlling language, and you'd better play the game if you don't want to be called out. And I say, look, you're not telling me what I can and can't say, like it or lump it. And it's just amazing that it's come to this.
And it seems rather arbitrary too, because there was this example on 4chan, just a troll website, where they made a joke that Nazis were using the OK hand signal or whatever, and it got picked up by the media, and the media thought it was a legitimate actual thing, and so they started to say anybody using the OK hand symbol was racist and was a Nazi, and the Nazis picked up on that and started to use the OK hand symbol as a specific demonstration. Making it like a self-fulfilling prophecy kind of a thing. And now it's just this general thing that everybody can do is now attributed to being a racist dog whistle, because what essentially makes the bad language is if the people you don't like use it or like to use it. And that representation can then become the bad language that we need to get rid of. And there's no limit on what it could be, just anything they like, because they're starting to use more ambiguous language and less overt hate speech. And so anything genuinely they do that could be applied to literally anything, well, we're going to call that hate speech too, just because.
Yeah, I'm waiting for, actually several years ago at the Jesus seminar, I would do at the Saturday night banquet, I would do a stand-up routine, really, and it always went over pretty well. Well, one thing I said in a spiel about how here is a prophetic glimpse of the future, and I would give future dates and say, okay, this has happened by this time and so on. I say whatever date, all religious language is censored as hate speech. Well, I thought, well, that's just a kind of a reductio ad absurdum. I don't think it would ever actually get to that point. But the way the Democrats especially have secularized everything, that it's not hard to imagine. Well, now that's pretty close to happening. The whole notion that of church-state separation has now for some decades been taken to mean you must not engage in any public display of your religion. Whereas originally, apparently, it meant there can be no officially sanctioned state church. But now, oh, you can't mention God. Well, is that a curse word? Is that an obscenity? Well, in their lexicon, it is. I always have trouble with atheist friends of mine who just have a scorched earth approach. And I feel like they come up with one alienating stunt after another. And I picture them at planning meetings saying, I think the public doesn't quite hate us enough. Anybody got any ideas for things we could do to make ourselves even more detestable in the eyes of the public? Because that's what they seem to be trying to do. Like, why? I don't get it. It's just a kind of verbal, a sort of soft persecution.
Yeah, it seems to be like a difference between the values of promoting secularism versus the values of demonizing religious people. And those two groups can mix well together because they share a lot of the same goals, but one of them can go a little bit too far sometimes.
Mm.
And I think that from my position, I think that everyone should be able to believe whatever they want. I'm a big free speech guy, so I think it's totally. That's why I'm against deplatforming. I think that you should be able to present whatever information you want, and if an adult human chooses to accept that information, they are in their right to do so. I don't think we should ban any information from reaching anybody other than children. Obviously, I don't think we should let children see all information. But if they're adults, they should be able to decide for themselves what to believe. And the goal of preventing information to being shared with other adults because they will accept it is a very, very, I think, asinine position to hold. But yeah, I think that within the secular community and within the religious community, there are people who are very dogmatic and they will take their belief too far. Luckily, I think in the secular community, the dogmatic people aren't as bad because, I mean, obviously they're trying to take this scorched earth approach and not and like disown religion in some way or abolish religion. But they're not like flying planes into buildings or anything, so
Yeah.
they're not as bad.
I find it ironic how you become what you hate, and in this case, like the freedom of speech thing, I can remember when in church, and I went to a fundamentalist church decades ago for a while. And I remember there was always the idea that you should not expose yourself to people promoting another religion or arguments against your religion from whatever source, because Satan would be using that as an opportunity to plant the seed of doubt. It was almost like you're in danger of being hypnotized by the devil. So don't expose yourself to that stuff. Well, they, oddly enough, have changed in the last decade or so to sponsoring debates where they will invite atheists, etc., and have a debate with William Lane Craig or one or another of these apologists. And I don't think that much of what they're saying, obviously, but I have to commend them. They realized in the wake of the internet that you just can't keep them down on the farm anymore. You can't shield curious young people by the old dodge, and so they figure, look, we better make our best case, and so they sponsor these debates, taking the risk they were afraid to take traditionally. I gotta take my hat off to them. I mean, they were kind of forced into it, but still, that was a courageous thing to do. Meanwhile, the people who were so enlightened as liberals have taken the approach, oh no, we don't want this counter ideology or that one to be available. It's the same thing. If you hear it, you will be corrupted by it. It's just amazing how people switch places.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's from when you're in a position of power, you tend to want to suppress opposing information because you have the ability to do that to some degree. Whereas when you're losing the battle, then it's totally pointless. You can't suppress it. It's already that battle's been lost, and so you have to essentially accept that the information's out there and play by the rules. You have to
Mm.
compete, like in the capitalistic market. You have to compete with something of ideas, the marketplace of ideas.
Marketplace, yeah. Mhm.
And I think that history has shown that suppressing ideas doesn't work. It's never a successful idea unless you can literally burn all of the information all at once. Like the
Mm.
what was it, the Library of Alexandria or something.
Yeah,
But unless you can do that, then the only intellectually honest position is to actually debate and discuss ideas and to let
Mm.
the ones that are the most compelling or the most accurate win out.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, yeah, somebody might have a worse idea but be a better defender. Well, you got to take that chance, and as long as you've opened the door to debate and considering the other guy's viewpoint, even if your motive is to find out, can I spot a weak point here, a chink in the armor? I mean, even if that's your motive, you're forcing yourself to become conversant with this other view, and you may wind up converting to it. In fact, many of the people involved in biblical criticism, and by that I don't mean saying, oh, the Bible's no good, here's what's wrong with the Bible, though there are plenty of those. I mean, the people that study the Bible with critical methodology, many of us used to be fundamentalists. And ironically, it was the curiosity about understanding the Word of God that made us come to a crossroads where we felt like, boy, the veneration for the Bible as absolutely true, that really creates more problems than it solves. Whereas if you take the critical approach, admitting that certain books were not written by the people they're supposed to be written by, that the miracle stories are really more like legends than reports, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, now I get it. Now this makes sense of the text. And so you wind up saying, okay, I guess it's time to put away childish things. Well, that's happened for a long, long time, a couple of centuries now. And that's going to be the danger if you want to have more than a superficial understanding of the issues. And that's true with politics, too.
Yeah, I think it's true with everything. There's this quote
Mm.
from a book, The Fundamentals of Chess, 1883, I think. Says the only way to get smarter is by playing a smarter opponent. And I think that's true in every area of discourse, because if you
Mm.
have your position that you've studied a great deal, and there's somebody else who studied the opposite position, um, they're going to find the weaknesses in your position that you don't see, and you're going to try to find the weaknesses in their
Mm.
position that they don't see. And from that kind of an exercise, you can learn more because you have two different perspectives looking at two different sides of the system or the debate or whatever. And if they identify a weakness in your position, you know what you need to work on next, and vice versa. And I think that
Mm.
that's the best way to learn in debate and politics and anything, is to have
Yeah.
opposing positions debate and find the weaknesses to know how you can improve.
Yeah. Mm. And what is the object? Everybody says they want to seek the truth, but do they mean truth materially or formally? I mean, if the latter, they're saying, well, I already know what's true. It's the Apostles' Creed, it's whatever. And therefore, I'm going to try to combat any rival view. But if you say, I am interested in the truth materially, I don't already claim to know what the truth is. I want to find it. But it's simply a charade and a sham if you say I'm seeking the truth, but of course I've already got it right here in my pocket. It's just a sham. And you're kidding yourself as well. So the quest for truth, you can only hope it becomes a quest for the truth materially, whatever it is. I don't have a dog in the race. I just want to know what is the truth. Not I want to vindicate my pet position as the truth.
Yeah, I think that when most people say they want the truth, it's more they want their truth.
Yeah.
Jesus is the way, the truth, and the light, kind of a thing. Like, oh, I already know the truth, and I want you to discover it. And so when I say I'm searching for truth, I'm searching for you to discover my truth. And
Yes.
I think that's one of the things that are, confirmation bias, endemic of uh, people who don't actually think critically, is the inability to consider the other side of the position. And I
Yeah.
think that, go ahead.
This is much like the postmodern view, and I think it's a very postmodernism is very illuminating. I'm a big fan of deconstruction, but unlike some, I don't think those tend in a leftist or illogical direction. Uh, the idea that some postmodernists have of incommensurable paradigms, where you have a view of things, what Peter Berger called a cognitive universe or a symbolic universe. You have a picture of the world by which you navigate. What's good, what's bad, who are the good guys, who are the bad guys, what's the proper goal, and so forth. If you and an opponent are working from different paradigms, you may find no common ground, because the degree of plausibility for any assertion will automatically be whatever would tend to favor my view. And you say, well, here's why you're wrong and I'm right, so and so. To the other person, it sounds far-fetched and silly. Are you kidding? But to them, no, this sounds altogether reasonable and compelling, because this is what is compatible with my presupposition. Can we? Don Cupid says the only way to escape this is, he's a radical English theologian, is to make the leap not of faith but of reason, to try to get above the warring, the dueling paradigms, understanding that that's what they are, and to realize if I can get outside and look at them both impartially, at least it's worth a try, because otherwise it's going to be nothing but confirmation bias. You can interpret, you have criteria to interpret anything that enters your space, and you will interpret it as taught by your paradigm and the community that supports it, that shares it with you. And so if you can somehow get around to the other person's perspective and see why they think that it's bunk and that something else is true, then that's simple charity of argumentation. It's the refusal to make the opponent into a straw man and to be teachable. I remember once I was doing an adult school class on postmodernism and started on deconstruction. Well, there was one man, a very well-educated, extremely intelligent and articulate guy, that he was so traditional in his approach to literature that he despised deconstruction and could not wait to attack everything I said, trying to expound it. And I said, you've got to calm down and make yourself teachable. Or you won't be able to understand this well enough to know whether you think it's true or not. And I've, in fact, with deconstruction, I have to admit, when I first read about this, I thought, what on earth? This seems crazy. But then I realized, wait a minute, there's got to be some method to the seeming madness. I mean, I knew people and respected people that were into this, and I thought, they're not a bunch of dummies. They're not crazy. Let me see if I can see what it is they see in it. I have to be open and put my objections on the shelf. And I wound up embracing it. I thought, son of a gun, why did I never see this before? And that's exciting. It's not to be feared. It's a way of growing your mind and your sensitivity. Or the biblical issue, does the Bible condemn homosexuality? And what about the Sodom and Gomorrah story? I remember long ago I heard that one scholar, Sherwin Bailey, said, look, the Sodom and Gomorrah tale isn't even about that. And I thought, wait a minute, if that isn't special pleading, I don't know what is. But then I thought, well, hold on, this guy's no dope. What is it? How does he understand it? Once I looked into it, I thought, darn if he isn't right. And that is an exciting experience of discovery. There's no reason to be afraid to find out what is out there. You'll only be better for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's the key. I've learned a lot of things from considering other people's perspective. That's how I've gotten as good at debate as I think I am right now, is from actually talking with the experts on the other side, the people who are the most qualified to be able to express their position as well as they can. And I think that's the best way to learn, and hiding that and preventing people from being able to access that, I think, is a detriment to everyone, detriment to the society as a whole.
Mm. The unexamined faith is not worth believing.
Absolutely. We do have some questions from the audience, especially about some of the things you said in the Pine Creek interview. That they find there's a lot of spicy things you said there that are very interesting to people. And in the in the spirit of debate, I'm happy to talk about those if you were willing. I'd love to chat about some of those. So, Slicey Slicer asks, how many Supermans do you have behind you?
Oh, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. There must be there's a few I can't see from here. There must be 20 of them there, and along with a few imitation Supermen. Yeah, I love comic book superheroes and always have, Superman especially.
Cool. So here's one from Brian Stevens. He says, Price also supports the January 6th riot, if I remember. Could you ask him about that? Does he still support that?
Well, I think you really have to redefine that whole thing, because I think it was pointless. I do think the election was stolen, and we're understanding more and more how that probably happened. Though I suppose it's moot now. I mean, not going to change anything. But from what I gather, there is serious reason to believe that the whole thing was a false flag operation, just like the supposed plot to kidnap. Oh boy, I freeze on names. Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of was it Michigan or Wisconsin? I can never keep them apart. Anyway, apparently there were, like, the guy that was egging on the crowd was even on the spot. People around him were yelling, "Fed, Fed." They knew he wasn't one of them, the actual protesters. And a bunch of the people involved were Antifa members. And the police opened the doors to let these people in. It seems to me pretty clear that this was just an attempt to pin this on Trump and to claim that he egged on rioters, which you can look at videotapes and so on. He certainly didn't. I wish it hadn't happened, but the way it was then blown up to, oh, it's the worst thing since the Civil War. Get out of here. So I think it's almost unworthy of notice. It wasn't any more than a little unfortunate blip. Certainly nothing compared to all of the Antifa, etc. riots in the previous summer, which the mainstream media seemed to think were just patriotic picnics. So I think that, I would hate to think that Trump had tried to mount an insurrection, but I think there is absolutely no reason to think that he did. And the January 6th thing, it's transparently just an attempt to disqualify Trump from running again. And so there's that doesn't prove that Trump is right and his critics are wrong, right? I'm not using this as a piece of a larger argument. It just seems to me this has been willfully misinterpreted, and it's nothing I would have wanted to happen. So I don't support it. I don't think I've ever said that I did.
So that makes sense. But I think that I would say the this insurrection was probably motivated by a lot of the genuine feelings of Republicans. I obviously think there were some Democrats in the crowd who are probably yelling and egging them on. I have no doubts about that. But I feel it's the same thing as like deplatforming. It's where the Democrats who were in the crowd were simply presenting an idea, and the Republicans who were also in the crowd, who I think the majority were Republicans because they were there for a Trump rally, accepted that information and were already in the state of mind where they wanted to do it. And so I don't think it was a false flag. I think, were there some Democrats who were egging them on? Absolutely. But I think it was a genuine representation of the ideas and beliefs of many of the people in that crowd. So I think it was genuine. I've seen, you made the claim about the security guards. I think it was they're waving them through. I don't think they opened any doors, but
I believe they did, though I could be wrong.
Well, I've looked into that a little bit, and all of the videos, there's like multiple angles, and mostly the ones that are shown on the side who are making the claim that they were waving them on. Actually, it's was shown to be incorrect. From a different angle, they're actually waving them past to like an exit area to try and get them out. And so it's not. The data seems to show that it wasn't being supported by the security guards. They were trying to do their job as best as they could in the situation. And so I think it was genuine. I don't think it was a false flag. And I think the security guards were just doing their job. I don't think there was any kind of conspiracy on either side, either by Trump or by the Democrats, to try to either do an insurrection or do a fake insurrection and blame it on Trump. I think it was just a bunch of people whose emotions were flaring and were very stressed in the situations, making decisions that were questionable. And that's my interpretation of the event. I don't think it was like,
you could well be right.
I don't think it was like a genuine attempt at an insurrection. Obviously, I don't think anybody in the crowd thought that if they got in and got the senators or got to the senators, that they were actually going to be able to change anything in America. I'm not sure if any of them actually thought that. It was mostly just a emotional response to how they were feeling. And so I do think that the left side has overblown it as if it has been like a genuine insurrection attempt, which I don't think it was. I think it was just trespassing at best.
Yeah, that might well be so. As with many of these issues, I suspect very strongly that this or that was the case, but I'm not, like climate change. It seems to me that is really a scam. But I'm not a climatologist, and I'm not going to live long enough to become one, and nor am I primarily interested in that. So I make guarded claims. I merely express my suspicions when I think I smell a rat, but I'm no authority on these things.
So there was another question about, you mentioned shooting rioters in your conversation with Pine Creek. You are for shooting rioters. Could you expand a little bit about in what circumstances you think that would be okay? Or if you still have a position?
Okay. Yeah, I think that you're at war when you have people, mobs killing people, looting stores, destroying people's business. This is a war zone. You have people warring, fighting, battling against civilization. They want to tear it down and replace it with who knows what. And if that's the case, you have to restore order. You can't be compassionate and give away the stores, the store of civilization. But with our current crime surge all over the country, because they feel like, well, these people, maybe they're criminally inclined because they belong to the oppressed poor, so let's give them a break. You can't do that. That's suicide. And you're seeing the results all around. So I think, yes, if you wanted to put a stop to this, sending in social workers isn't going to do it. You have to understand that these people are combatants in a war against Western civilization in the big picture, and against your city and your livelihood, and you are entitled to, the government, even citizens are entitled to fight a war. And just like it's awful to have to kill Hitler's soldiers because they're human beings, you kind of got to do it. Like the old rabbis said, that everybody has a yetzer hara, an evil inclination. to go with it, there is a good inclination. Can't remember the Hebrew for that. And everybody's got both of them. They warned people that wanted to be sanctified, to become saints. Hey, don't be too quick to get rid of the evil nature, because it may be you're going to need it. Is it cruel to shoot enemy soldiers, or even to imprison convicted criminals? Oh man, I can't even imagine the maddening boredom of being in prison for years. That's so cruel. No, let's not do it. No, I'm afraid you've got to be cruel in a case like that. I don't mean torment them, anything like that, but you gotta have the stones to do it. Like Martin Luther said, the hangman is not doing the proper business of a Christian, but he is the left hand of God. Some of these things have to be done, or for the sake of high ideals, so-called, we're going to augment and abet what the evil do. So the rabbis said, or how about this? Religion tends to be down on lust, right? Oh, you're going to go become an adulterer or a rapist or whatever. Of course, you don't want those abuses, but should you extinguish the libido and become like Gandhi and so forth? You're beyond any libidinal lust or anything. You do that and you got no human race. Right, you certain of these things. It's like a Star Trek episode, the one where Kirk is somehow split into two by a transporter beam accident. And there's this savage Kirk that they have to get under control. But the other one is sort of like Jimmy Carter. He's weak and indecisive. Spock says, Captain, there's Klingon cruisers off the bow. Should we hit them with phasers? Well, no, Mr. Spock, maybe we can hit them with a bunch of cosmic marshmallows, and that'll make them back off. No, you've got to shoot at them. And I'm afraid that is what has happened. The veneer of the good impulse has to be sacrificed in wartime. And that's what it is. It's wartime if you've got rioting.
So in the case of peaceful protests, like I think most protests, the vast majority, I think it's like they've done data on this, and it's like 90-something% of protests are peaceful protests. In those cases,
question there. No, nobody should be harmed or anything there.
Gotcha. So that I think is one of the things that is the most important to clarify, that peaceful protests, totally fine, should never be shot. It's only in the case of like violent protests or protests where you're like protecting your own property, I assume would be one stance you would take. Like people who own stores should be able to protect their own property. Castle rules or stand your ground rules. Like if you're assaulting someone's property or breaking or stealing their property, they have a right to defend themselves. And in that case, I would technically agree. I think that yes, if someone's assaulting your property, you should have the right to defend yourself. And so in that case, I'm also pro shooting protesters who are attacking your property. But as long as it's peaceful, there's no justification for that whatsoever.
Certainly not. Yeah, that would be suicidal in another direction. You're just, not only would it be immoral in itself, but it would be stupid to do it because you're making people who are merely ideological opponents into martyrs. You're actually doing their cause a favor. So it's wrong in every possible way.
So that does lead to the question Tirar asks. So on the January 6th, would it have been justified to use violent force against the January 6th rioters if they were forcing their way into the premises of the building?
I don't think so. It doesn't appear to me like there was one person killed, and it was one of the protesters, and nothing has ever happened to the guy that killed her. I think that at least no harm was coming to individuals, and it's bad. They shouldn't have done it, but I wouldn't think that would call for being shot down.
Well, how is that different from people breaking into Target or breaking into the property of a personally owned business? Because it seems like they're equivalent scenarios where protesters are becoming violent, damaging property, either private property or in the case of the January 6th, it was government property, which there were government officials inside. It seems like in both cases, the violent protesters are damaging property and potentially putting people's lives or property at damage, and they would be equally justified to defend themselves in both situations. I don't see why there should be a difference between those two.
Yeah, you may well be right. Something does ring true to me about that, but that's no argument against it. I'd really have to give that more thought.
Also, I believe 4 people died in the January 6th thing. It wasn't just one. There was Ashley Babbitt was shot by a Capitol police officer. Kevin Greason died of a heart attack, collapsed on the sidewalk. Roseanne Boyland crushed in a stampede of Raleigh rioters, and Benjamin Phelps died of a stroke. So there are 4 people who died during the riot. One was from trample, one was shot. Let's see. Slicey Slicer asks, can you ask him where he stands on the Rittenhouse case?
This is the young fella that shot. He was trying to sort of
Yep, he
traffic and bring some calm to it, but he wound up being attacked and defended himself and winding up killing the attacker. I thought he was perfectly justified. That seems to be a simple case of self-defense. It wasn't like he was Charles Bronson in the Death Wish movies, picking people off. He had, I mean, I have it on tape that this guy was approaching him, about to attack him, and he did the only thing he could do rather than just be a martyr like the Buddhist monk that immolated himself in the famous story, right? I mean, what was he to do? So I never thought that was problematical. Tragic, but not problematical in the sense we're talking about.
So the typical argument, Moonshoes makes a comment that Rittenhouse went there to shoot people. So that's the typical argument from the left. I know for a fact that he broke at least one law, which was to carry firearms across state lines where he wasn't allowed to carry them, because I think the legal age in the state he was in was higher than what he was. So he definitely broke the law there. But once he got into the situation, I don't think he did anything illegal beyond simply breaking the law of carrying the weapon over the line. Because having seen the videos and going through the court case, I think that the jury was correct to count him innocent and that it was self-defense in both, because he shot 2 people and killed them. I think he killed both, but I don't remember. And I think it was self-defense in both cases, and he was correct in those cases. But I do believe he broke at least one law, which was buying weapons and carrying them across state lines. And I think he should have been convicted on that one. But beyond that, the question is was he justified to go to a protest with the goal of trying to, I don't know, stop the protest or slow the protest down in some way, while having weapons? And that, I think, is the questionable issue is, but it seems like I would take the position that as American citizens, we probably should want to try to stop protesting or stop looting. And it's like the militia thing. Like, we have a kind of a duty as American citizens to, as a collective, try to stop and prevent those things. And so I wouldn't hold that up against him, that was his motivation or goal. It seems like people on the left are angry at him because the people doing the looting were people on the left, and they were looting for specific reasons, for their needs, because of economic issues. They didn't have enough stuff, whatever. And because he was opposed to that, it seems to be that's the reason they were angry at him or vilified him for wanting to stop the protest, because they thought the protests were justified.
Yeah, I just don't think you can justify that. There are other things you can try. And I think that once it gets to that point, what are you going to do? And I think he was justified.
Gotcha. Next question is from Winston's mom. Are you still on board the Trump train? Do you still support Donald Trump?
Oh, yeah, I think he was a great president, which is made even more clearer every day because of the farce of Biden and his merry band of total incompetence and weirdos. I think if they just decided, well, whatever he did, and even if the results were good, we got to undo it because Orange Man bad. It just seems absurd what they're doing. And though I think DeSantis would be a good president and would reverse a lot of this nonsense, I'd like to see Trump given a chance to finish his good work. I've never understood how people can think he's so evil unless they're just believing everything that Democratic spin doctors say. Oh, he's a racist. Well, that's kind of surprising given his record of hiring minorities, getting anti-racism awards from Jesse Jackson, all kinds of stuff. It's just patently not true, but they don't care. It's become talking points of Trump haters, and I just don't see it. I would love to see Trump get back into office.
You say it was
DeSantis is fine. I'd love to see Mike Huckabee as president. These guys seem sound and so on. Unlike, for instance, Pence, who strikes me as pretty much like Lurch from the Addams Family, kind of an animated mannequin, self-righteous and a windbag. And there are various Republicans I think would be awful as president. But Trump, I think, was decisive, creative, got a lot of great things done. And you see how important it was by seeing how the results of doing the opposite now.
Well, so you mentioned that you think Trump was doing a good job. What specifically about Trump's policies do you think were beneficial? Because I've studied a bit into that, and I don't agree. I mean, I think most politicians are awful, but I think Trump was particularly bad.
Well, the immigration thing, the wall, I think that was very successful and would be now, and would have averted the incredible mess we have now. His making us energy independent. I mean, what's not to like? His getting the NATO partners to begin to shoulder their part of the burden of defense. And the exorcising of the woke nonsense from the military and so on. Lots of things he did were so great, in my opinion. And I frankly find it difficult to understand what people find offensive. I mean, he was blunt, but who cares? I mean, this is like when Patton was nearly dismissed because he slapped this guy in the hospital for just being afraid to go back to the fight. I don't know the ins and outs of that, but the idea that you're going to get rid of your best general because he had a lapse in etiquette, basically. How stupid are we? And I think a lot of the criticism of Trump is the same sort of thing. Come on, grow up. It's not mismanners. It's not about etiquette. It's a matter of what are the problems we face and who has the guts and the creativity to do something about it. And he did, and things are very good. The unemployment among minorities was greatly reduced. People were more prosperous. I just don't see the problem.
Well, so on the wall thing, there's a few documentaries on the wall that are pretty successful. They show that I think 90% of the wall that Trump built was already there. He was just rebuilding already existing wall, and
I understood that at the time. Yeah.
So it's most of his wall build didn't really do anything. It cost a lot of money, and the amount of money it cost seems like it could have been used for better things like healthcare, education, welfare, Social Security. Could have been used for a lot of things to benefit people's lives significantly more than just keeping people out. And it seems like I don't see the impetus for wanting to keep people out in that way. Because if we take the stats, most of the people who are illegal immigrants, the vast majority are normal, hardworking people who don't do crime or drugs or anything. And so I don't really see
that's probably true, but you got the problem of making it a bilingual country. My wife has been a teaching assistant for I think 18 years. She sees what happens when you have a bunch of the students who you have to, they require language remediation, and everything slows down for all the other kids because of it. Well, now, that's going to look like nothing compared to what's going to happen now. And the labor, the payment, like menial jobs that American citizens would have taken. A lot of people are going to take, oh, you can pay me anything, like the poor exploited migrants that have been here for a while. I don't want to see that happen, but there's it's such a strain on the resources of any city that receives all of these people. I think it's a disaster. It's great to have immigration, and we'd be much worse off without it. But we're talking about illegal immigration in which it's impossible to vet people. And we know, like Trump said as soon as he came down the escalator, they're not necessarily sending their best. I mean, as you say, I'm quite certain that most of the immigrants are only doing what anybody would in the circumstances. So we're going to get along better in America. But are we to have no way to control the flow? I think that it's not a black and white issue in that sense. And all of these terrorists and criminals, the smugglers and the drug cartels, they're just in the general flood. That would never have happened with Trump. He was already getting rid of loads of MS-13 thugs and so on, but not anymore. And or foreign policy, another, well, that's you out of, don't want to change the subject, but that's another one where the present guy is he's the Manchurian president. He's on the take from the communists, obviously, and so forth. I just find it impossible to imagine how anybody thinks that Trump was doing wrong. And the objection about, couldn't a lot of the money for the wall have been spent elsewhere? Well, yeah, but I think a whole lot of the pork in the budget should have been spent for that stuff instead of having studies of hamster races and commissions examining whether Thanos' finger snap would really have done what it did in the Avengers movie. I'm not making it up. I mean, there's always such stupidity where our taxes are wasted. They could have done, I'd rather see that cleared up, but that's never going to happen, as you know.
Right. All right. I think that both parties are terrible at spending money and don't know what they're doing. But I think that the Republicans are far worse in that regard, especially Trump's wasted money on the wall. So, for example,
I can't see that. That just is amazing to me.
Well, so I think we're the only country, as Tarar points out in the comments, that we're the only country that doesn't teach students multiple languages in schools. Like every other country already does that. So I don't see that as a problem of having a multilingual country. I think that's something that would
that's a rather different thing. I wish they'd teach languages as they did millions of years ago when I was in junior high. I took year after year of German, and others are taking Spanish and French. That's great. We should do that. It's a terrible failure that apparently we don't. And but this is a matter of flooding the system with people that can't speak English yet. Why are you bothering to send them to school? If you had Spanish language schools in parallel, that would probably alleviate the problem. But I don't know that. I don't know why nobody suggests that.
Well, wouldn't that be essentially solving the problem of the bilingual country kind of a thing?
Yeah, that's what I mean. There are problems anyway, but it wouldn't be as much of a problem if you did that. And that, given what's happened, that's the thing to do. Perhaps someone is advocating that, but I've heard nothing about it. I hope they do.
And in the case of the drug lords, MS-13 and other things coming in the country, I think the easier way to solve that is just to legalize most drugs. Problem solved. They have nothing to sell anymore. And so I don't see that as a huge issue. I think that the issue with the drugs coming in is mostly with stupid politicians not legalizing drugs. But so if that was gone, most of the people coming in would be just people looking for work. And there's been a number of studies done on immigrants, and the amount that they generate in GDP growth outweighs the cost that is inflicted economically from healthcare, social security, whatever welfare that goes to them. And so I think that investing money to stop them coming in would actually be a detriment to our economy, not a benefit. I think it'd be better to let them come in and not really worry about it that much, and then do things to curtail the negative side, such as the drugs, like legalize drugs, legalize marijuana, decriminalize cocaine, those kinds of things, which many countries have done already, and it doesn't seem to have had a huge negative impact on those. So I wouldn't see a problem with doing that to solve the drug problems. And in doing so, we generate a big boost for our economy. So I think there's better ways than investing billions of dollars and building a wall, which stops economic growth, a source of economic growth that has been very beneficial for America in a lot of ways. And so I think that the things we could have done with the money to would be like improving education, like we both agreed, doing bilingual education in public schools would be phenomenal. Legalizing drugs. I think if we do those things, the immigration will stop being a negative in essentially any sense. It'll only provide benefits to America, like it did in the inception of the Statue of Liberty. Bring us your whatever that quote is, the cold, hungry,
Tired,
poor,
your
whatever.
poor, your huddled masses, your masses yearning to be free, and so on.
Exactly. So I think that trying to build a wall to stop integration, to stop essentially drugs or whatever, is a huge wasted effort for a problem that can be solved in a much easier way that can generate us an income. And it's going to have hugely negative consequences economically, because there is a lot of economic growth from immigration and the transmission of wealth in those people groups. So I think that the approach the Republican Party, or Trump specifically, is taking would be damaging to our economy, not beneficial, whereas there are much better ways to do it. I think the Democrats are closer to that. They're still terrible, but they're not as bad if weighing the cost benefit analysis of what the policies are doing when implemented. All right, next question is from Brother Ben. Trump 2024 presidency. You mentioned that a little bit. You're pro Trump 24 presidency. That's not a question. Asking about Trump's tax returns. What is your position on the Trump's tax returns thing?
Well, from what I don't know that they found any kind of. Did they supposedly find some sort of smoking gun? I've heard a few numbers, but that goes right over my brain dead head when it comes to economic matters. What is supposed to be the issue there?
Tax evasion, mostly. It's super common of the really wealthy people to do tax evasion, and so Trump is highly likely to have done it. He's almost definitely guilty, but the IRS is underfunded. There's no way to go through all the lawyer processes and legal fees to be able to associate that, to convict him that he did it knowingly, as opposed to just like diverting all of his stuff to tax people and letting them do it. It's a huge process that I don't think they're going to be able to do unless we like actually fund the IRS to be able to try to prosecute billionaires, which we just don't. They don't. Most people that the IRS goes after and audits are people in under $50,000 range, because those are the only ones they can afford to actually do it for. So I don't really think it's a serious issue, or it's going to go anywhere until we actually fund the IRS. And so it's kind of a waste of time from my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Election stolen. That's an interesting one. Why do you think the election was stolen? Because I've been following that one for a while, and all the evidence seems to point that there is essentially no, very, very few faulty ballots, illegal ballots. It seems very legit to me.
The way they, I think, engineered the COVID thing to have an excuse to change the voting procedure so that you could easily stuff the ballot boxes and so on, and the way in particular swing states, things were going one way, and then suddenly about closing time, all the votes started being for Biden. it seems to me very apparent that it was a rip-off election. And then when Trump tried to get the Supreme Court to examine the case, they were afraid to, and that was that. Anytime I see a cover-up like that, I think it's like a guy on the stand taking the Fifth Amendment. There's something being hidden there, and it's obvious what the one thing would be. So again, I'm not going to make another career out of studying this historical issue, but it seems to me that I smell a whole bunch of rats in this one. And I just find it hard to believe that Biden, of all people, could have gotten more votes for president than any candidate ever. It just seems to me it's this mumbling mannequin who never got out of his basement and couldn't string a sentence together could conceivably have actually won this election. So I may be wrong, and as I say, it's a moot point now, but my opinion is that that's probably what happened.
So my interpretation is that the reason there was a large swing of votes to the Democratic side at the end was because that's when they counted the mail-in ballots. They didn't start counting the mail-in ballots until the end, and most of the people who did mail-in ballots were Democrats because Republicans were always against it. They hated it. They openly advocated against it. Don't do it. It's cheating. Blah blah blah. So very few Republicans used the mail-in ballot system, which means since they counted mail-in ballots last, they're always going to be predominantly Democratic. And so it makes sense there's going to be a large swing of votes at the end. I don't think that is a particularly big mystery or something that would indicate any kind of ill doing on that part. It seems to make perfect sense that would be the case because Republicans despised mail-in ballots. The Supreme Court thing, like the Trump brought 40 court cases, I believe, for voter fraud that were brought by his team, including what's his name, Giuliani something.
Mhm.
And all of the court cases were terrible. They were so bad. Like they none of them had any evidence, not a single one. There's a
How do we
massive
know
YouTube.
that since they refused to hear them?
Oh no, the lower courts did hear them. All of the lower courts went through the evidence, went through all of the public. All of the information is public. There's this really big legal channel called Legal Eagle. It has 2 million something subscribers, and they go through the court documents on screen with you and read line by line and show you how legally terrible they are. Like they have no place in a courtroom whatsoever. And this is why they were thrown out. This is why every single one of them lost. Not a single one. Or no, one court case. There was one of the 40 that was won, and it had to do with some minor issue that didn't matter to anybody, I think. And that one's also covered in the same YouTube video, so you can check that one out. But he goes through the legal standing of every one of these, and they're just terrible. There's nothing there, which is why the Supreme Court didn't look at it. Not because they're afraid, but because as soon as you read it, if you know anything about law, you can see like this is just garbage. This is terrible. There's nothing here, and that's why it's thrown out, and that's why the Supreme Court didn't take a second look at it. Not because they're afraid, but because it's a terrible legal procedure, and Giuliani's a terrible lawyer. And so I think that
I don't really accept that. I don't know if it's false, but that sounds like a lot of spin to me. But again, I don't have time or interest to research the whole thing, and it's now moot. But I would you probably have seen what's his name's film 2000 Mules or whatever. What's
D'Souza, Dinesh
yeah,
D'Souza. Yep.
it's not that, but it's something close. But anyway, we're talking about the same thing. Have you seen that?
Yes, Dinesh D'Souza's movie.
Yeah,
Yes, I've met Dinesh D'Souza. Yes, he's a very interesting fellow. I don't have the data on that one, but I don't think it was a very credible source thing. But all of the court cases are available, so I would suggest you pick any one if you have time. Take 30 minutes to pick one, look it up on the Legal Eagle case, and see if you find that to be a compelling explanation for why it wasn't accepted by the Supreme Court if you have time, because I would love to hear your thoughts on just pick any one of the court cases you think is interesting and should have been heard, and then look at the reason why it wasn't and see if you think it's because bias or that they have a legitimate reason to not look at that court case, and let me know what you think if you have time. Next question is from Bob Hunter. Why is the WEF not designated a terrorist group? WEF, the World Economic Forum. What are your thoughts on the World Economic Forum?
I think that is like a James Bond villain conspiracy come to life. I think that is exceedingly dangerous. And though I guess I would not call them terrorists, though, as far as I know, they don't um, initiate or mastermind violence and so forth. They may there's certainly reason to believe they want population reduction, but they're not talking about bombing people and all that. So I don't know that I would call them terrorists, but I do think they're a power hungry totalitarian. I almost said implicitly, but I think it's explicitly totalitarianism. So I think they're very dangerous. And the oligarchic elite are trying to reduce the population to make it more easily controllable, to change food habits. Well, they might have something to do with the huge number of food processing plants that have been destroyed, but I don't know that that's been proven. But Gates, with his poisonous vaccines and sterilizing vaccines and all that, these people strike me. And Zuckerberg and all these guys seem to me to be conspiratorial oligarchs and would-be tyrants. I'll go that far. I used to think these things were insane conspiracies, but now they don't even seem to try to hide it. I've been chastened from my moderation on this. So not terrorists necessarily, but a very dangerous bunch of enemies of democracy.
Well, I'd say that applies to any billionaires. I think that pretty much anybody, most people in power would probably be tyrants if given the opportunity.
Oh, they're probably members of this thing. Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree.
But I don't think that's like the World Economic Forum is a lobbying group. They lobby for things. It's not an organization that does anything. They don't have any legal authority anywhere. So the fact that a lobbying group is totalitarian or wants more power, like that's literally their jobs. That's every lobbying group does that for every group. So I don't see it as like a I don't think that they should be considered any more dangerous or significant than any other lobbying group. They're not like a government affiliate or anything.
Well, the groups like BlackRock, they're controlling investments and injecting like your company must pursue the AOC agenda and all of that, and the money you invest, whether you do that stuff or not, is being put into the support for these groups that are trying to change the way we drive, whether we travel, what we eat, and all these things. I think there really is concrete and insidious subversion going on. And just because they are rich oligarchs, they don't have to necessarily break the law. They influence the law. And again, they're not the only ones who do, but merely influencing law in the abstract is not really the issue. How are they influencing it? To what end? And it seems to me it boils down to Schwab saying, you will insinue order, you will own nothing, and you will like it. And then you wait for him to say, we have ways of making you like it. I might as well add that. I think these guys are a real danger.
Well, I mean, I think any kind of like, obviously BlackRock owns pretty much lots and lots of things. They own a large portion of the world economy or America's economy. And so I think that the way that they use that is definitely a concern, but I think they're a significantly bigger issue than the World Economic Forum. I don't think they have as much say as BlackRock. BlackRock's huge. Next question is from Bob Hunter. All politics have been corrupted. Do you agree?
Oh, yeah, you bet.
Me too. I would also agree. Brother Ben asked, what's your view on Biden? No holds barred.
He's the Manchurian president. Obviously is a puppet of the People's Republic of China. And the way he won't stand up to anything they do, it's fine with him that they take all of our manufacturing and so forth. He won't say anything against them and their terrible policies and all manner of things. And he amazes me if he anything to defend Taiwan if it ever came to that. He's so in bed with them financially that they bought them out. We know that China is supplying the fentanyl to the Mexican cartels. Why does Biden not do anything about that? I would not be surprised. Biden's on the that he's in league cartels. He obviously has conscience. He's as much of a sociopath as this weirdo that killed these 4 college students. He hasn't done that because he doesn't get his own hands dirty, but he is corrupt and competent. I mean, either would make him a horrible president, but he's got both and then some. He would have said that Obama was the worst president we have ever endured, but this guy makes him look like George Washington.
I don't think I would agree. I think Obama did a pretty good job given his situation with the economic crisis that he was in at the time. I think he did a really good job of dealing with that because of the housing collapse, the banking collapse. He handled that well. We didn't starve to death. We recovered. So I think he did a pretty good job overall. I think he probably should have focused more on healthcare rather than banking reform, but that was his choice. But the internet is breaking up again. I get that from the audience, and we have been going for about an hour and a half. Has been a great conversation so far, so I really appreciate you coming on. Do you want to give any links? Absolutely, thank you. I appreciate it. Do you want to give any links or references where people can find out more about your work?
We got a website, robertmprice.mindvendor. That's MINDVEDOR, all one word. And that has a whole bunch, like a really archive of my essays, sermons, my pastor at the church, reviews of movies and books, even stories, and a whole lot of my output with loads more to come. Also, I have a Patreon account where I do a column, sometimes more often, called Zarathustra Speak. And so I think you'd find a lot of entertaining and intriguing stuff in either of those places.
Perfect. Thanks again. Really appreciate it. It was a great conversation, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
Absolutely. Talk to you later.
Okay.